Welcome to the Upside. I'm your host, Paul Santinello, with the #1 rated show in its time slot on LCTV. Today, we're going to be talking about the political races that will be coming up in November, and I am very honored and happy to have two special guests. I have Rob Rizzoto, who is the politics reporter for the Republican and Mass Live. Thanks for coming, Rob.
Oh, anytime.
And I have my good friend, international political consultant, Anthony Cignoli, who's a fellow Bulldog. And we'll talk about the toga story later. But today what we're going to talk about is the upcoming races in November. We have, from this point in time, 6 weeks out roughly, maybe 5, but somewhere in between there. And we have some nice hot local races, but also some nice races at the top of the ticket. They're going to draw some people in. And it seems each of the candidates at the top of the ticket are the gift that keeps on giving to their opponent every day, it seems. So what I want to start with is, and then we're going to talk about some of the ballot questions, because I think some of that might drive some of the vote in this election. And I don't think that's the thing, I think people, the wild card, in my opinion, of what's going to happen with those ballot questions and what do they draw. So the first one I want to talk about is, you know, obviously the top of the ticket is Charlie Baker and Martha Coakley. And there's just some news on Charlie Baker today and yesterday and so forth. But I want to get your take on it first, Rob, and then we'll go to Tony about the Baker-Coakley race.
It's a, you know, from, I guess, a political reporting point of view, it's a very interesting race. You know, maybe not so much for the public, they got their eyes on other things, but you have Coakley, who's ascended to the top of the Democratic ticket, and yet the Democratic base isn't necessarily enthusiastic about her candidacy. They're backing her, they're supporting her, they're going out, they're phone banking, but they're not necessarily passionate about her as a candidate. And what I've seen as far as Baker goes, because he is a moderate Republican here in Massachusetts, you have a lot of crossover support. You know, as a Republican candidate running statewide, you always want to tout that. But some of the crossover support I've seen on the Baker side has been really enthusiastic. And just that same level of energy and excitement for your candidate, I haven't seen as much of that on the Coakley side.
Okay, Tony, what do you got?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that, especially too because we know that even with 16 years of Republican governors in Massachusetts, from Weld to Romney, it's the independents that make this race now. From the primary to the general election, it's the independent voters, the unenrolled voters, who have got to sign on with that Republican candidate. And I do see a lot of activity and a lot of energy there. I think the other thing here that's intriguing to me too is that Baker has got a ticket. He's got Polito on the ticket with Karen Polito, who's run statewide once before, ran for treasurer, almost beat Steve Grossman. That was a tight race. And she is a firecracker. She really is. And on the Democratic side, Martha Coakley has a running mate now, Steve Kerrigan, but most people don't know who Steve is. So in the past few weeks, and even I think the next few weeks, people are still being introduced to her running mate. So she's a little bit handicapped there. Whereas Baker has got a running mate who's a known quantity and who would stop at the opening of an envelope, or if she drives by a Dunkin' Donuts on the way to an event and there's 14 people there, she's going to stop the car and say hi. She is an aggressive firecracker, and I think she's a benefit to him.
Right. And from my side of it, what I see is a big difference from 4 years ago with Charlie Baker, where there was that lukewarm support. Richard Tesai is a running mate, strong state senator, but not strong crossover like Karen Polito is. And I think that's a major difference in his ticket, is that she's a bulldog. So with this recent flap over, you know, the sweetheart comment, and Polito was just on Boston Herald that said that she said he should apologize for it, but here's what the real issues in the campaign are. And I think that's a huge difference in the race for him, that he's got someone that can pick it up where he drops it. And I don't think he had that 4 years ago. The other difference is I see a different Charlie Baker than 4 years ago, and I think he's learned a very valuable lesson of what he should be saying and who he should be going after. And I think he's got a much more positive campaign than he did 4 years ago. 4 years ago, there was a little bit of whining going on with, you know, this is what Deval has done and so forth. Where this time it's him saying, here's my vision for Massachusetts, as opposed to what's wrong with Massachusetts. And I think that's a different, there's definitely a different energy in the base for Charlie Baker than there was 4 years ago. And I just, you know, seeing City Councilor Tim Rook come across the line.
Democrats,
you know, and I'm sure that has some pull in that gubernatorial race. And the other thing that really, and I'm still baffled by how Steve Grossman, I just thought he was the guy that was going to beat Martha, because I thought he would have been a tougher opponent for Charlie Baker than Martha Coakley, because they're very similar, businessmen and, you know, that type of thing. And I don't know why that ended up the way it ended up, because I thought he had more of the base, I thought, than she did. But
He had the nomination of the party. He had so many mayors in Massachusetts with him. You just never know. On any given Tuesday, you don't know what it is. It's going to click one way or the other. But I had seen Grossman several times in very Republican rooms. A great example, the Westfield Chamber of Commerce, which is very Republican. You know, a lot of business folks there, and almost all tracking on the R side. He wowed that crowd completely, to the point where there were several really huge ovations for the things that he had to say and whatnot. And you'd think that, excuse me, maybe he might have been the person who might be better matched to Baker in those areas. But it's not always the pocketbook or the tax issues that move and motivate people. Often it's the heartstrings, and just was a strain. The universe, too, of who votes in a primary is so different than who votes in a general election. So, you know.
Grossman, he ran a really strong primary campaign. He was everywhere. Like you said, he didn't just go to friendly places to hear how much they loved him. He went all over the place, and he had kind of worked that way as a treasurer, and he built that rapport up. You know, that's why I think some of the polling we saw that showed how strong he could potentially be, and it just, you know, 17% was the turnout right around there for the primary. Yeah, anything can happen. You know?
That's a good point, too, because in so many polls, whether it was Suffolk's polls or Quinnipiac, when you looked at it, the potential for him to have a victory in the primary was there, but he just couldn't reach and move those folks to get them to come out, the not regular primary voters, so to speak.
Now, there was some attack ads on Martha Coakley from a PAC about the gas tax, not knowing what it is, and, you know, and so forth. And part of me was saying, you know, why are you doing that in the primary? Because you might get what you want, which is Martha Coakley defeated, which then you have Steve Grossman running against you. And then you have a lot of, and I think that's, you know, and obviously they must have seen the polling too, or something that indicated go after her now, because I don't see how Martha Coakley brings that excitement into the Democrat campaign, a ticket anyway, for the governor's race. I just don't think, you know, the Scott Brown loss, I know there's still some soreness there that she blew that campaign, good, whatever, whether that's the reality or not. But, you know, can she rally the troops? And I know that, you know, people will come together, but you also need to have that fire in your belly. And I don't know, I don't see that from her, that the fire's in her belly, like I see it from Charlie Baker. I mean, I see Charlie wanting it. And I don't know if Martha wants it, or Martha, I don't know her, Ms. Coakley wants it, or she just wants to be the governor. And there's a difference in that. You know, you got to have that fire in your belly when you're running, and it has to come out and make you come in, you know, and draw you in. And I don't know, do you see that with her? I mean, and I'm not trying to be critical of her because I don't know her. I just, politically, I just see kind of like this mellow kind of thing, and not.
I mean, from what I've seen on the campaign trail, she is fairly laid back. You know, but depending on the topic, you can see her be very passionate. She's one of the candidates that I've seen where when she is talking on an area of comfort and she's not perhaps over-advised ahead of time and she's able to just, here's what I think about it, and really just kind of be natural, I think that's her strong point. And I think when, I almost feel like, you know, when she feels like she has to hit a certain number of talking points, and, you know, perhaps it's all strategy behind the scene, I feel like it numbs down her natural. You know, she's a prosecutor. You know what I mean? So she's,
well said.
You know, that's her. You know, that's her forte. When she has the opportunity to really be passionate about something she cares about, I feel like she nails it. It's the other times where she's up there speaking, and you just kind of feel like it's, you know, Democratic talking points, that it doesn't strike. That's just my
very
thought.
well said. To even election night, she wins, and to hear her speech that evening. You know, it was a bit of a sing-song kind of thing. It was a lot of rhetoric, and you could feel she's not comfortable with this. This is what she's been advised to say that evening. The next day, it's Governor Patrick who stands up for her and begins to take the campaign and make statements, make comments towards Baker about the job that's been done by the Democrats overall for the last 8 years. And that is on my mind greatly now, because I'm seeing it, especially in Greater Boston, I'm seeing that it's Governor Patrick who's engaging Baker to this point. But with this upcoming debate in Greater Springfield on the 29th, the media consortium that's put this together, Mass Live, the Republican, TV22, everybody coming together to get this done, you can't really stick with the script so much then. You can't go with just what your advisors and your political consultants have told you to do. It's alive. You're engaged. And I think we saw with Elizabeth Warren and Scott Brown how a debate can have such an impact that there's a change made. Warren scored on Brown, and 40 minutes after that debate was over, as well as Brown actually did, as good as he could on some of the issues, women's issues, she scored there. 40 minutes after that debate was over, there were new ads going up by the Warren people, taking right from that debate. That's why I get excited about this. Paul and I are boxing fans. We're pugilists and whatnot, you know?
Right.
But to me, that's when political stuff, it almost becomes like boxing. You can't do the Muhammad Ali rope-a-dope thing all the time. Sometimes you got to go into like Joe Frazier or Marciano and slug away. And I'm intrigued to see what comes in this debate.
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to this one.
This debate, another factor here, it's not just going to be Coakley and Baker. You have the three independents also in the mix.
Yeah.
Between Evan Falchuk, who's trying to establish the United Independent Party as an official party en masse. He's looking beyond this election with his efforts. Jeff McCormick, who some say is peeling away some of the Charlie Baker's vote, and Scott Lively, who is he's running a part-time campaign. He's the anti-gay pastor from Springfield. But you have this mix of people that are going to be on stage. It's not going to be gun control, and you know what the answers are going to be. They're going to be mixing it up in a way that you're not going to get if it was just the two candidates. And I personally, I feel like the voters get a lot more from it that way. It's more political discourse, which is what it's all about.
Yeah.
Oh, and as a political fan, much to what Tony said, you want someone to get a little poke in the eye and come back and come out with that nice roundhouse, right? You try to knock them out or something. But and I think that lends it to it when you have that many people on stage, and you have a pretty diverse group up there.
Oh, yeah.
From all the way from the far left, probably to the far right, and a lot in between. Independent candidates, the messages that they're conveying, especially Evan Falchuk's message. If you're not a middle-of-the-road kind of person, that independent, I don't know who speaks to you more than his ads do. And I thought his ads were very well produced. They weren't very political from the standpoint of saying, here's what's wrong, here's what's right, here's what I'm going to change. But it just said, it kind of made you. I think it was, what most people feel. Politics kind of sucks when you hear Democrats and Republicans constantly pointing at it, and that's why I think people go to that unenrolled status. They just can't take it anymore. They lean one way or the other. And I think his ads were, spot on. I don't know what they've generated for him, but I'm very impressed with them because I think he hits a button of unenrolled people.
Yeah, they were simple. They weren't overproduced. It was, him standing there, hi, I'm Evan Falchuk, and he's speaking directly to the voter. He takes 30 seconds and just kind of breaks it down. Here's why I'm in this race. And, polling indicates that it hasn't made a significant impact for him. But it's always hard as a third-party candidate or independent candidate to break through the fray. It's just the nature of the two-party system. But I feel like he's really nailed it as far as speaking to the unenrolled voter, which numbers speaking.
And you're absolutely right. The commercial is just him. But that's what I'm saying. He hit the button. He delivered it right, and it wasn't this fancy produced thing with all these graphics. It's just a guy telling you how he feels. But I think that's how most people feel, about politics.
He's engaging, he's believable, it's a message a lot of us would agree with. The only problem is that for a lot of independents and unenrolled, they get the drift. It's a two-party system. I've got to vote for either this one or that one. And gosh, should I waste my vote on this fella who certainly can't beat Coakley or can't beat Baker? Right. But I think his message is starting to lay a base for what may come down the road and whatnot. He's very good on his feet, very, very good in the crowd. And I'm going to be intrigued to see what happens with him in that debate. I dig the idea of all five being up there. There's always two schools of thought. Do you have just the two main party players and let them duke it out? Because it's pretty obvious these are going to be the two.
Right.
But do you put the other three in? I like it in this one for another reason. It shows you how the top two are going to be dealing with these other three people. And I love that line from JFK. As you campaign, as a candidate campaigns, so may they govern. You can judge so much by the campaign. So if one of these three is able to get under Martha Coakley's skin, or anger Charlie Baker, or make them look non-gubernatorial, that can have an impact. And my money's on Scott Lively to make that happen, unfortunately. Holy smokes.
He's getting under people's skin.
Quite a few people.
And that's the part that I was saying about, you want to see that poke in the eye. And I was going to bring that up a little bit later about campaign and represent how people are going to govern, because there's a couple of things I want to go over.
Sure. There's
a bunch of races under that for the statewide office, and I don't think anybody knows it. It's probably the best kept secret in Massachusetts is that there's 4 constitutional offices, besides the lieutenant governor we talked about a little bit, but you have the treasurer's race, which you have Steve Grossman, the outgoing treasurer, so you have 2, an unoccupied office, so to speak, the Secretary of State with Bill Galvin and David DiArcangelo, what's my others? I wrote them down here, the auditor's race, and then the Attorney General's race. In which I don't even know if most people knew there was a Republican running, and it's been that quiet. But I think the benefit for the Democrats is that they had a primary race. So their signs are out there, their bumper stickers are out there. I don't know how that's going to fare for the Republicans, and I don't know if there's going to be a long coattails in this election. That's the question I have that I was starting out with is, when you see this race, if Martha Coakley or Charlie Baker can't deliver, what happens to some of these constitutional offices? You have 2 incumbents, but you also have 2 open positions. Do you see a Republican wave that we've been hearing about? And do they get tossed, or do you pick up those 2 open seats and you can't beat the incumbent type of thing? What do you think?
Well, I think that could go either way. It's hard to say what,
I asked you for an answer, man. What are you running for?
It's an interesting question. I mean, you look at all these different races, and sure, let's say Baker comes out on top, but is that going to equate to Republicans up and down? Not necessarily. Even you've got these races where the name value isn't high on either side. Anything could happen.
Well said.
You're looking at, look at the AG's race. Look at the treasurer's race. You got candidates that are, I think the ones that have made it to the primaries are very articulate. They're very well spoken. I've interviewed all these people, and if they had more of a spotlight, I think that it'd be a different campaign. But they're in the mix. There's 50 campaigns going on, and they're part of it. I feel like those ones are toss-ups. I feel like regardless of what happens at the top of the ticket, they can go either way. Maybe that's just me not seeing a majority of Massachusetts voters saying, well, what's the letter next to their name, and just,
Well, if there was one party majority in the state, you could say that potentially, right? If it was mostly Democrats or mostly Republicans, you might say, but since it's mostly unenrolled.
Yeah, that's why I feel like there's room to be won over. And I think that's why you see the candidates on both sides, some of them working so hard, because they know that it's not a given. They know that their race could go either way. And they're hitting it hard, some of them, the best of them.
The polling too, and always the only poll that really counts is the one that's on election day. But as we look at Rasmussen's polls, these most recent polls that are starting to rip apart, some of the other media polls are there, and Quinnipiac and stuff, and you tear into what I love to really tear into, the crosstabs. Tell me why you're thinking this way. There's potential for some of the constitutional officers who are Republicans. I find it amazing that Miller and Heffernan, names that most people don't have a clue, are so close to their Democratic opponent already, and they've really done nothing yet. And I wonder about something else, and I've heard both of you kind of touch on this. The Democrats love to do the coordinated campaign right after the primary. And I wonder if that was a real good idea this year, because the coordinated campaign is Martha Coakley, Maura Healey, certainly Steve Kerrigan as lieutenant governor, and then everybody else is on the list and whatnot too. But it's vote for us, we are the Democratic Party, we're the players, right down the line. And I don't know, it just gives me this feeling of, this is Massachusetts, not New York. We don't vote the lines here. We don't have those lines when you walk in and whatnot. We like to mix it up every now and then. The other thing, Paul, I hear what you're saying too. On some of the constitutional offices, they are so important to us. A lot of people don't realize what some of those constitutional offices actually do. Certainly we know with the Attorney General. This is someone that goes before the SJC to fight cases. We saw 2 major cases with Martha Coakley in this past calendar year, and the outcome of that has a huge impact. But Treasurer here in Western Massachusetts, especially if you're from Springfield, you know what the treasurer is. Exactly. This is not the person, he or she, that runs the lottery alone. This is the person that handles everything from school building assistance, the commission. You know that, especially sitting in this building with all the work that you and yours did to get this built. Where does that check come from? It comes from the treasurer of Massachusetts. And if you get hit by a tornado and you need a new roof, and you're Dominic Sarno, and you need all these different things, you know who Steve Grossman is, or you know who the treasurer is. But the impact of those constitutional offices is huge. Last one, not to dominate this too much too, it's intriguing. It may not be so much in this particular race that it's the party lines on both sides, who's at the top, who's at the bottom, that motivates. It could be the questions, and I'm sure you're going to be asking about the questions. A lot of us thought it would be casino that would drive that. Watch the next couple of weeks. Watch the gasoline tax piece. I think it's starting to drive some things right now. I'm seeing an impact and more discourse on that. And when I'm reading the polling, I'm stunned. People are as avidly, voraciously on one side or the other of the gas tax as they are on casino. That one could be a hot one.
Okay. So we'll get into those more towards the tail end of this. What I wanted to ask you next about, because I agree with I don't know where these are going. You have some local ties here in Long Meadow with Mike Heffernan. He's married to a Long Meadow resident, David Wood's daughter, and so that's why you see a lot of signs in Long Meadow.
Okay, all right.
And that helps that there's some connection to Western Mass, but I have no idea whether, even the incumbents, you're not seeing their names out there, and I know it's early still, but you haven't seen Bill Galvin advertise or Suzanne Bump and so forth, and that is, because I just see the air being sucked out with the gubernatorial race and the questions, because I don't have the advertising firm, but I would imagine that the casino money that's going to go into the casino question is probably going to suck some of the air out of the room. But I want to ask you about you guys, because I want to talk about local races as well.
Sure.
I want to ask you about political stunts. Something that really disturbed me is that I saw a headline that Maura Healey and Martha Coakley both called for some sort of rules against violence against women in high schools on the heels of the Ray Rice incident. And I'm as the father of two daughters who are in high school, the violence against girls is probably going to come from girls, not guys. And as a father of a son in high school, I would tell you that you just stereotyped every young man that's in high school as being violent against women. I think anybody who's violent against women should actually die, but that's just my own personal feeling. Because if you're going to, that and pets, if you're going to hit animals and women, you really don't deserve to live. But that's just a personal opinion. And it's endorsed by the show, by the way. Yeah.
Okay.
But I thought that was a political stunt to garner some back-in and create this war on women in a campaign where there isn't a war on women. And the other political stunt, and you and I talked about this quite briefly, is that when you have campaign spending limits come out. And I want to talk about the Martha Coakley, Maura Healey, let's get some rules and regulations in high school and your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I that when they had asked the Massachusetts Athletic Association for, overseas high school sports to, they had said that we're not saying that there's a problem, we're saying we want you to establish more guidelines. It was really kind of, I read it kind of wishy-washy. I think they were pinning on, the whole NFL issue, with Roger Goodell, who's actually from my hometown. Might not be the time to bring that up, but I think they were
Christmas cards, buddies. That's okay.
But they're like latching on that, and I feel like this whole there's been lately, and this came back up with the sweetheart comment relating to Baker. There's been this thing with let's focus on women. Women are a big voting bloc, and look at the ticket this year in Massachusetts. But by trying to take these very pro-women stances and draw this line against Charlie Baker, I don't know if that works with him. They did it with Scott Brown in 2012, but he had some of those national votes that
well said.
There was the Blunt Amendment.
Sure.
There was things you could, regardless of how you felt about the issue, you could frame it that way. And there was politically, strategically speaking, there was a selling point. With Charlie Baker, the guy is really a moderate Massachusetts Republican. Can you paint him as this anti-woman Republican extremist, even by taking these very pro-women stances where, like I said, there may or may not be an issue? I don't know if that's necessarily a good strategy. That's just my thought.
Well, I agree with that, but even separate from the politics, there's the policy side of this. As a political consultant, we would look at this and we'd say, sure, 64% of everyone who's probably going to vote in the general election is a woman. You're already both women candidates. You don't have to pander, you don't have to go in this direction. And the other aspect of it too is, where were you on this a year ago? You are the Attorney General, and you are in the Attorney General's office, Ms. Healey, Attorney Healey, and has had an impressive track record for 7 years. The things that Maura Healey has done in the Attorney General's office, she's had the 3 toughest jobs there, no question about it. But where were you on this a year ago or 2 years ago? I agree. I don't think that they needed to go in this direction. It was a little bit cheap. And it also can come back to haunt you. Even as we're saying what we're saying right now, I could see in debates someone saying to them, well, where were you on this a year ago or 2 years ago? And gosh, to the average electorate, I always think of something that Joe Napolitan would say. Never denigrate the electorate, never think that they're dumb. They are a lot smarter than we think, and they see through these kinds of stunts every now and then. Give me something else that's germane. Gosh, talk to me about how the two of you fought so hard to hold back rate utility hikes a year and a half ago. What does that mean to us out here in Western Mass or in Worcester or up in the Pittsfield? Give me something germane. And in addition, one of you is the Attorney General, the other is in the Attorney General's office. Gosh golly gee whiz, what else have you done to protect women and to protect kids? Give me some of what you've done, not this. Don't take advantage of this.
I just thought you're trying to garner publicity for something that is disgusting. as, you know, Ray Rice knocking out his girlfriend and stuff. I mean, there's other things to do cheap political stunts with, you know. I just thought I thought they really did go over that line with that one. It just was uncalled for. I mean, even if you felt that way, like you said, you're the top law enforcement official in the Commonwealth, and you just thought about this? You know, you had all this time in office, and I just thought that was so. And I do think, especially with Karen Polito on the ticket, that they can't get away with that as much with Charlie Baker as they did with Scott Brown. There's a difference because, you know, I understand Charlie's running for governor and Karen's running for lieutenant governor, but she's got as much in this race as he does. And like you said, she's the campaign dog in this. I mean,
she's running like she's running for governor. That's what she's actually, that's what you get the feel from for her and whatnot. Yeah, definitely, without a doubt. Wow.
She's literally everywhere. Like you said, she is taking that stance where there's no group of people that's too small for me to go and introduce myself to. And in relation to running with Baker, you know, I've heard her say, you know, if he was anti-woman or he had these problems, I wouldn't be running with her. And she is a very tough, articulate woman. You believe her when she says that. If she didn't like him, she's not going to have anything to do with it.
And she's believable.
Despite the size disparity between the two of them, I think she's like, what, 5 feet tall, and he's 6'6". I could just see her, you know, grabbing him, pulling him into the corner. If there was an issue on one, I'd be afraid of her if I was Charlie Baker.
She's tough. I just saw the Boston Herald, you know, banner was, you know, just Charlie Baker apologized, and he should have.
Oh, yeah.
So it sounded like, you know, your mom taking you by the ear and say, you're going to go over there and say you're sorry now, you know. And to your point, I think that, you know, she's so strong in this race that it's not, you can't get away with some of those things that they nailed Scott Brown with.
I was in Boston this morning, and she immediately roared at this on Boston radio. You could not flip a channel on real radio or internet radio and not hear her somewhere. She must have lined up the whole morning and just gone from one to the next, and she launched up, and he should have, and she was rough on him from there. Takes all the air out of the issue right off the bat by addressing it and saying, yeah, you know what, he's wrong and he should apologize. But let me tell you about this. And I was like, it's amazing. I heard her no less than 5 times over maybe a 2-hour span on regular radio and twice on internet radio, one of them being the Boston Herald internet radio. That's got like 800,000 listeners on a bad day. So she's, I'm like, wow, holy smokes. It's like she's taking direct shots of espressos right into her veins or something. I've just never really seen anything like this in our local politics, state politics.
She definitely has that stamina in the campaign. You look at her, you say, holy smokes. She's one of those people that actually likes to be out there. You know, and those are rare. But the other one that I want to talk about is the local political, I call it political stunt, is that during a Democrat primary for the 1st Hamden district, you had a spending limit request. And now there's been another one, now that we hit the general. And the spending limit is, and just disclosure, I was involved in the Bronski campaign for a period of time. And I'm not any longer. So the stunt to me is, it didn't work in a Democrat primary, now we want to have another campaign spending limit. And it tells me, and I said this to Rob earlier, is that to me, if you really want to say we want to control the money in, let's not spend any money and just do Lincoln Douglas debates throughout the district every night of the week. When you put a limit on it, you're saying it's okay to spend this much, but not this much. And my thoughts are, I mean, we know it didn't work in well, I don't know how much it worked in the Democrat primary because the person they challenged still won. What are your thoughts about things like that?
Well, you know, I think that, you know, she came out with this, and it's you're looking at your opponent's strength. You know, Eric Lesser, he's pulling money from all over the place, you know what I mean? Like an uncle with a nickel behind your ear. He's coming up with money, you know? And she's thinking that's, you know, she's worried about that, and rightfully so. If he's got all this money, you know, I could be working, you know, very hard and getting my message out with the voters in every coffee shop, gas station, and diner, but he's going to be, you know, on the small screen 24/7. I understand where she was coming from with it, but yeah, I mean, in the primary, it didn't seem to resonate with people. But then again, arguably, were people even paying attention? You know, could it do something this time? I think if there's enough follow-up and they're watching her and she paints him as this not local person to a degree, could that work in conjunction with the money? Potentially. But yeah, this one didn't quite strike me. But I delegate to you.
No, actually, those are good points. But you know, one thing that we come to find, because I get asked this question everywhere, whether we're in Ohio or Iowa or Vermont or wherever, the money question. And I actually have candidates say to me sometimes, "My gosh, we can't raise too much or spend too much." And I look at them and say, "I hear you. I dig where you're coming from. I know what they might be thinking in Peoria, but the money always wins." Great article in the New York Times where they really got into the science of this and whatnot. And what does the electorate think of the dollar? It's intriguing. They kind of don't care anymore. They've become desensitized to a lot of money coming into a campaign. They expect it. And sometimes they look at it, too, as that candidate's prowess at being able to be a good pal, of somebody that can get it done, so to speak. And then, so as they campaign, perhaps that's how they can govern as well. In this instance, though, was the Baranski team thinking that perhaps because of the disparity between the votes of Eric Lesser and Tim Allen and Chip Harrington, who probably got the best rate of return of any candidate of the 5 that were running on the Democratic side. He spent this and he got this, and everybody else was kind of close to this and whatnot for a lot more money spent. You know, is it trying to bring up and play on that from the primary? As Rob says, does it bring you back to some thoughts of like where's the money coming from, that type of thing? That is a campaign I would love to see the debates. I know Eric Lesser challenged and said 9 debates. The response from Debbie, I think in your articles, was let's do 18 or 40 or 100 or whatever it is. But guess what? I go back to what Paul said before. We're about 5 weeks out now. Nobody's debated yet. How do you fit 9 debates into the next 5 weeks? You know, I'd love to see some of those debates, and it's really something that is owed to the public. And in that regard, too, I think what a lot of us wait for are the debates that you've put on. I mean, you've changed things. And forgive me, I don't mean to take that, but your debate style, or I should say, you're inviting the candidates in at Mass Live and the Republican. It's a whole new ballgame. And putting it on video, getting it out there, for a lot of folks in the electorate, you can't say you don't know where they stand when you're looking at an hour, you know, between candidates. And there it is. You know, I love that structure and that form. And kudos too to the others that are hitting it. 22 doing all those debates at noontime, you know, and but then getting them online. It makes a difference, you know. So hopefully we'll see those too. And that's a question that'll come up in one of your forums and whatnot.
Just to promote a little bit, we do have another round of those we're going to be doing. It's with us working with New England Public Radio and CBS 3. Basically, we do it kind of roundtable style we had in the primary. I'm looking to do them a little bit more adversarial style for the general election. We're working on booking as many of those as we can. We got some scheduling issues. Everybody's busy this time of year. But yeah, we want to do another slate of those. And the idea is to bring the candidates right there. It's an hour of TV, that turns into several articles online and in the newspaper. And our intention with it is to A, bring the issues right to the voters, and B, deflate the power of money in politics a little bit. How much can your money control the conversation when we're having this conversation and I'm hosting it on TV? It's like, it's a different dynamic. And I feel like, the more you see people articulating their views, the voters win.
I dug that too, because you just said something else. So the multiple articles that came out of some of these debates, in my profession, what we do is we win or lose a debate, and even if we lose, we try to create the perception that we want on Facebook and social media. It's hard to duck it when you've got a reporter or multiple reporters breaking down, here's what came up in the debate, and here are the 5 hot issues, or the 3 hot issues, or the 2 hot issues, just in case you didn't watch the whole hour or you missed it. I think this is cool. This is a good thing. It's a good public service. It's part of what the 4th estate should be doing, so it's good.
Yeah. See, and I look at it a little bit different. When we talk about campaign spending limits, we all know whether it's on the federal level, the statewide level, there's always ways to get around them. And I'm not saying that was part of the, the intent there, but there's always ways to get around them. I also think that if you raise $300,000 for a state senate race and you spend it, you're insane, because there's so many more things you can do with $300,000. But you're talking to someone who raises $2,000 for a selectman's race. But I mean, but God bless them for having that ability. But there's always ways to get around it. And I think that, and you hit on a point that, see, I don't watch television that much. And I have specific shows that I might want to watch, but there's other nights where I don't. I mean, I might watch a Red Sox game or something like that. But I think that people have become desensitized to television ads, because it depends on what generation you're trying to hit, too. And with TiVo and all that other thing, the guys who are into sports, that 35 to 55-year-old male voter that everybody's dying for, they're hitting the pause button. And I think what you hit on is that you could take your debates, and whether they're on Mass Live or they're on TV, and you're streaming them, and now it goes into social media, and then you're the guy that says, we're going to take that ad and we're going to blast it all over that place, or that snippet. And I think that's more of the equalizer than campaign spending limits would be. During the Democrat primary, I saw probably 3 television ads for the state senate race. And it was 2, no, I'll take that back. I saw 4, because I saw 1 for each candidate, or 3 candidates, and I saw 1 twice. But that's it. And out of all the television I watched, that's and again, whether it's a Sunday afternoon for football or, anyway, I think that, the type of things that you're talking about and social media can negate a lot of campaign spending. direct mail is, I don't know if it's antiquated, not antiquated, or what, but to me, social media, when you've got thousands of friends on Facebook liking your campaign, which both of those candidates do, that's the way to get your message out.
And through Facebook especially, I mean, just the kind of nature of the way it's all woven together, whatever their algorithm is, things kind of spread. If, let's say we're friends and you're promoting a certain candidate, saying, look at this, look at what just came out today, whether it's an article or it's an ad, the way it spreads is, it's almost like being tapped by a friend and saying, hey, check this out. And that always means a lot more to people than a stranger saying, this is what's important and you need to pay attention and here's why. So yeah, those things are definitely, I don't think the true power of social media is yet to be understood by any of us, politically speaking. I could be wrong, because Tony could have a line on this already. But I feel like this is, we go 10, 15, 20, 20 years from now, I feel like it's the way it kind of grows organically, friend to friend. It's this hand-to-hand thing that...
And that's what I think, that's what I'm trying to reference, is that, you guys host a debate that's videotaped, and I can take a snippet of that and put it online and say, hey, this is why I like X candidate. And now my group of friends see it, and someone can take that and share. And I just did that, with a quote that someone had, and share that. And then, like it's your friend tapping you. It's not some commercial on TV. It's Tony Cignoli said, "Hey, look at this candidate." And I know Tony, and I'm a friend with him on Facebook and whatever. So you look at it differently than you would as if you saw it on a local TV station, and here's your ad, because you know that he produced that ad, he's the candidate, he's going to say what he wants, but now you got him in a debate, but it's something that was shared from friend to friend as opposed to on TV or something.
You're more likely to check it out.
Right.
I mean, on
and I think that's the key. They're more likely to check it out if a friend says it.
Yeah. Like I know on like my side, I want people to read my articles. I'll share them on Facebook. I'll share them everywhere else. But when something comes back to me, you know what I mean, I'm more likely to take a look at it if it came from one of my friends than from the media. Maybe I shouldn't be saying that, but it's true. It's, and in the Democratic gubernatorial primary, the one thing that came back to me, I saw shared several times, was this late in the game commercial Don Berwick did, where he's the doctor and he's talking these two guys and kind of giving the prescription for this broken political system. It was kind of funny, tongue-in-cheek, because he's a doctor. But that one came back and resonated. But I actually watched it probably like 3 times online, as opposed to everything else that I would only watch in the work context because of where it came from.
Yeah. Okay. So now we have some other races. This other state senate race, Don Humison, who won a special election and against I don't know what's first, Leahy.
Patrick Leahy, yes,
and I've known Don for a while. I think he's the hardest working state senator that we have.
Stunning.
But again, you don't see a whole lot, whether it's advertising or what, and I don't know how you're going to read that race, especially, again, with the top of the ticket. It was a close race from the last time, and I think this is a different candidate with not different backing, but what do you think?
Becomes Westfield versus Holyoke, and it's so parochial in both communities. Patrick Leahy, being from Holyoke, I was intrigued to see, even during the primary, for a variety of Holyoke candidates, this concept coming up from Holyoke-centric, our time, our concern. And it was more aimed at Springfield than anything. In this particular, and if you looked at some of those races where you had Holyoke-centric candidates, it's like it's Holyoke versus Springfield. Everybody kind of forgot about Chicopee, which is the new voting power in Hamden County. And I won't go long into that. If you take a look at the primary and what I think you'll see in the general, watch Chicopee, a bellwether community we look at now in polls. Like we look at Randall and the Howland place that can dictate the entire race to us. We now add Chicopee into that because it's a microcosm of the Commonwealth. But not to go along to that piece, Humison, strength in Westfield, Leahy, perhaps you'd assume strength in Holyoke, more than likely with his brother as a city councilor and all that. But then what it all comes down to is the other parts of the district, Agawam and Southwick and the rest. That's where I think this race gets won or lost, is out in that neck of the woods. And it's a very, very diverse district. When you look at the Western Massachusetts senatorial districts, they're more diverse than they are in the East. In the East, the districts, communities have a lot more in common with one another. Here, when you've got Westfield, which can be very affluent, the $600,000 homes, where you've got a phenomenal industrial tax base going on, and then you've got Holyoke, that's still struggling always, the urban community. It then becomes the agricultural neck of the woods, so to speak, of Agawam and Southwick that make a difference. It could be jump ball. And in a Democratic year, Patrick Leahy's got an opportunity, but Don Humison has always surprised people. The same way that he surprises a lot of us for what he gets done. We just recently saw him get a piece passed for the for Westover Air Force Base for the Galaxy Community Council for a tourism piece for their air show. That air show brings back millions in a few days. Everyone kind of negated it, but it was Humison, a Republican, who got a Democratic governor. Those are the kinds of things he's got to get out there. And forgive me if I go long enough. So Patrick Leahy was asked, how do you beat a guy as likable as Don Humison? And he said, I've got to go right at his record. I've got to talk about the differences between he and I on the issues that matter to people within the district. That could be one heck of a race. But forgive me for dominating too much. I come back to what you both have been saying. We're 5 weeks out. I haven't seen these guys engage yet.
Yeah.
Where is it? Wow.
That's it. This is, and Rob was on the show earlier, this is probably the quietest political season.
Yeah.
Whether it was the DA's race or these, I mean, you have 2 state Senate races that are going to be competitive, which we haven't had at the same time in a long time.
Yeah.
You have a bunch of state rep races now that no one thought would be competitive, and I can think of at least 4 that would be very competitive that you just haven't had before, and yet you're not really hearing anything. And I don't know how much out space you guys have sold, but it better be a lot, because there's no one, like you said, they're not coming in one-on-one together. I mean, they're just, you haven't seen it.
I haven't seen the fireworks.
I'm stunned by it. I really, really am. And maybe I'm spoiled, because when I got started in this game, it was the days of Bill Mullins, Paul Karen, Tony Schiavelli, Michael Walsh, Kenny Lemansky. These guys went at it. I mean, street to street. Karen was legendary, Paul Karen, for the door knocking and the rest. And he had no money, was the other piece. And he was up against moneyed Democrats, and he got up against a Republican who had almost taken the incumbent in the seat out. I think it was a 19-vote difference between Rudy Schumer and Bob Brown. Brown, Reagan Revolution time, massive sweep, the Republican. Karen takes each one of these guys out handily and whatnot with almost no money, but it was the fireworks. It was, let's go, let's debate. Every street corner, every 3 days, there's folks holding signs, there's door knocking going on, there's something. So it's not just a question of do you have the money to do this or not. I'm just amazed. Even in the DA's race, you had really 2 candidates out of the 4 who consistently were roaring at this all the way through. And it was intriguing to see the final outcome of that being Anthony Gallooni, the guy who did everything, hit every piece, every bit of fireworks. As great as the resume may have been for some of the other candidates like Brett Vitero and whatnot, it's Gallooni who took it to the street. It's Gallooni who took it to your house, who brought it in, realizing, gosh, you know what? Paul Santinello may not see my 800 TV commercials. I got to find a way to get into this guy's house. Yeah. And how do we do that? And the big piece of that, it comes down to the aspect of data mining right now. How do you get to folks? How do you make that happen? A lot of it is the concept of data mining for Deval Patrick and Barack Obama. Are we seeing any of that on the local level? Not really. And are we seeing any real engagements? 5 weeks out, and I'm not seeing a lot of engagement. You're kidding. Wow. Forgive me, those campaigns I just mentioned, the Bill Mullinses of the world, Ludlow, an icon. The Mullins Center named after him and whatnot. Right. This guy started campaigning in March for November, even when no one was running against him. And we're just not seeing that. And
the difference, not the difference, but I think the difference maker is going to be, you say there's no engagement. Well, the engagement comes from the top down in the state, right? So by the time you get down to these state rep races, who's going to be paying attention? Because, are you going to be listening to the Charlie Baker, Martha Coakley debate, or are you going to be listening to Bob Russell, Angelo Pupolo?
Yeah.
And so even though they might engage in 3 weeks or 2, whatever it is it going to be enough in time for either candidate, to either side, the incumbent or the challenger, to really do anything?
Sometimes, too, it's the local race that can fire up at the top, too.
Yep.
You mentioned the ones we haven't heard a lot, but where there is engagement, Russell and Pupolo out in that district.
Yep.
It's a street fight.
Yep.
Wow, didn't see that. And then Mike Finn of West Springfield, the state rep, versus Nathan Beck. Very engaged. The mailings are astonishing. And the street fight is on. The lawn signs, the old-fashioned stuff and whatnot. Yeah.
Yeah, neighborhood by neighborhood. I know with Pupolo and Russell, that really kind of, it just rose to this level that I didn't expect. And
campaigns. Yeah.
Russell, I can say, out of all the different campaigns going on, he's the only one that showed up at my door.
Wow.
I've gotten mailings.
Bob's
somebody in the bushes.
Yeah, just somebody in the bushes.
Yeah, both very nice
Oh.
guys, and I've seen Pupolo at tons of events. I'm not saying he's not hitting the trail.
Sure.
I'm just saying that for all the different races, other local county, otherwise, that's the only one where somebody's actually came to my door.
Yeah.
And I just feel like you can't undervalue the strength of a person-to-person conversation saying, hi, I'm so-and-so, I'm running for this office, and I just wanted you to meet me. You're going to hear a lot of things about me before Election Day, but here's who I am, here's what I'm about. And I feel like you make that connection with somebody, you are much more likely to disregard what you're hearing as far as the other
You're
stuff.
dead on, because I'm hearing that Mr. Russell has signs where no Republican has ever had signs before in the city of Springfield. They're popping up on streets that are just been Democrat strongholds for so long, but he's door to door in that neighborhood.
Yeah.
And he's meeting the people. And he's not doing door to door maybe in the traditional way of some of the other candidates are. And I know Dan Alley's doing a lot of doors in Westfield, and Nathan Beck's doing a lot of doors, but I think Bob's doing them in a very strategic way. But he's actually stopping and taking the time and then asking people, what about your neighbors? Who should I go talk to? So instead of just looking at the list that's given to him, he's taking the feedback from the people he's actually meeting at their homes and saying, who else on your street do you think thinks like you? And that's different than just saying, hi, I'm running for office, here's what I stand, when you have a question. Now you're asking someone what they think, and then you're going to the next house and say, hey, I was just talking to Rob, and Rob said X, and I think that's much more powerful than just going down that list like most people do in a campaign. And that's why I think you're going to see that. I'm really intrigued with the 4 state rep races, because at the beginning I may have said most of them probably don't have a shot, but I think there are 3 rep races. I'm sorry, but they do. I think I think Nate Beck has a strong possibility. Bob Russell's doing a great job, and Dan Alley, I know. That's going to be an interesting race, because that was a special election which he lost. But I'm hearing that he's going door to door, and I know John Vilas is working hard, so I don't know if the people will see a difference now between the two, or if the gubernatorial race is going to bring it out.
You know, Westfield is such a strange town, Vilas versus Alley. Take a look at very popular mayor, Republican mayor, Dan Knappich, and how close his race was last time around. That was almost inconceivable. Sometimes a little issue can light a fire, the littlest thing. You know, Silvio Conte used to say it the best, and a Republican congressman, I know you knew him well and whatnot, but he had a great line. You know, in my district, I try to make sure I take care of the liberals, because gosh golly gee whiz, Tony, if I do Form 99 time and I miss the 100th, they hate me, and I'm already a Republican, so I've got a problem. In this instance, sometimes Westfield can be like that. You know, that Republican base can get squirrely on an issue or two. It's amazing. Yeah. But you know what I like about Pupolo, Russell, Beck, Finn, is that they're so engaged that it makes it almost impossible for real issue discussion not to come out. Pupolo is actually talking about issues, as is Russell. They differ on them greatly, but how often do we see that? You know, and it gives for Pupolo, it's saying, well, here is my voting record. Here's how I voted on that. Okay, so yeah, judge me on that. Bob and I disagree. And then Bob come in, well, here's why I disagree. And there really hasn't been a debate yet. A lot of this is social media. It's the media covering it and whatnot. But I kind of dig that. That does remind me of some of the old campaigns. Not seeing that everywhere, but sometimes good campaign, good street fight, it allows the electorate to really know where you stand on issues, and to get a few questions in too, to say, hey, Mr. Pupolo, Mr. Russell, how do you stand on this, that, the other thing? Those will be interesting debates when they actually occur.
And I do think you hit a point that these local races that weren't here 4 years ago are here today. And that greatly benefits Charlie Baker, because I do tend to think that people vote up, maybe not necessarily down, but if you're going to support a Republican candidate in the state rep and state senate, you most likely are going to vote Republican up. And he didn't have that, and that's throughout the state. All these races, these local races that have been out there. And so I think that's going to be a major difference for him, because that support base, even though he might not be energizing them, he's got somebody else energizing them, and that might help him.
Like Brian Lee's in the Senate in 1990, after he won in 1988, if I'm getting the years right and correct, and when he had another 10 Republican senators in 90 running for re-election, or who had just been newly elected, this new base of folks, and it did help Bill Weld. That's a great example. Yeah. Then there was actually from the bottom up to Weld. They pushed it towards Weld. Very intriguing, even to the point where Paul Cellucci, who had been in the Senate, who was running for governor, the other Republican senators sat down and said, listen, this doesn't make sense. You guys get together. We're all with you, which begot Weld, Cellucci, and that was stunning to so many people that happened. Yeah. But those races, those individual races, those geographic areas that they represented too across Massachusetts did make a difference at that time.
Okay. So the variable I have in all of this statewide ballot, we have 4 questions, 2 which I think are hot button questions: the gasoline tax and the casino. So Jeff Deal, the state representative Jeff Deal, has made a career so far out of this, the axe the gas tax, whatever he's calling it, tank the gas tax. He's done a fantastic job of organizing and getting his name out there. And it's interesting because he's campaigning all over the state on the gas tax by helping other candidates.
Yeah.
So he'll go to a fundraiser but campaign for getting rid of the gas tax increase. And that's where the state legislature tied it to automatically raising the gas tax with inflation, okay? So they never have to vote on it again. A cowardly move, but that's my opinion. But it's the right opinion. It's a cowardly move by any legislature to forego. They did it with their pay raises too, Rob. I won't bring it to the mix. But those are cowardly acts where you don't want to ever have to vote on something again. But it's going to be an interesting question because, as you mentioned early on, the polling of that question, it's a small thing. But it's going to be a small thing, I think, that balloons. And how do you think that affects things?
It's become hot. It really has, because I understand the argument for the side against. I understand the Democratic argument. I understand the governor's argument. My God, the bridges are falling down. This money is dedicated just to bridges and infrastructure. Okay, but the common guy argument, the independent, the unenrolled person out there, that person in the middle, that mom who's worrying about how much money is coming to our school and whatnot, is saying, okay, so that money's dedicated, but the bridges are still falling down. We live here in Western Mass, where maybe there's another part of this. We're fighting to see if we're going to get 100 mil or whatever it's going to be to fix I-91. Mayor Sarno's out there screaming every day, the legislative delegation, the rest and whatnot. And yet, in Greater Boston, for an upgrade of, I think it's the green line, or maybe it's the orange line, I get the lines confused, a route from Brookline to MIT, which already exists, but an upgrade, without blinking an eye, $1 billion, with a B, 8. You feel the disparity if you're outside of Greater Boston. And I can see how Deal's attack on the gas tax could have legs. What's really amazing to me, I'm not just watching it benefit Republicans. I'm seeing Democrats around the state saying, yeah, you know, he's kind of right. And yeah, I know our party line is, gosh golly gee whiz, it's dedicated dollars and whatnot. But yeah, you're right. Because why? Frankly, and it's just the facts, we've got one of the worst DOTs in America. We're second only to New Jersey in wasteful spending on transportation. Whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, there's the bottom line. And that bottom line, I think there's a lot of moms out there. There's a lot of folks, parents, who are saying, gosh, I'm struggling to pay the mortgage and the orthodontist bill, and gosh golly gee whiz, to pay at the pump. I might want to send that message to Beacon Hill. You know what? You didn't do real well with that dedicated earmark to begin with.
And I think that's it. It's a send a message to Beacon Hill. It's not necessarily, you know, I disagree with it, but you want to send a message to Beacon Hill.
Yeah. 351 cities and towns in Massachusetts. This is something we'll see more of in the next week because it's just starting to come. 351 cities and towns in Western Massachusetts. The 10 highest paying property taxpayers. 9 of them are in Western Mass. The other is Sturbridge, which is pretty darn close to Western Mass. We always hear this argument, and that's why I think our local media is so important, too, because they're able to make that case when they've got a State House Bureau about what's really happening or going on down there, you know? And we do. We all feel that. We're left out. We're Western Mass, whether we're Longmeadow or Ludlow. That's one thing that we've all got in common. They're getting everything out there. And that's the kind of thing that helps the Eric Lesser, helps the Deb Baranski. That's part of what their message is. Who makes that message best in all these races? Pretty cool.
What do you think?
Well, you know, I have to agree, especially with, you know, you're looking at the infrastructure. Okay. You know, there's some state roads I can drive down around here if it's going to rip the tire off the car.
Yeah.
You know, and that's crazy. It's crazy to me. And then you get out there and, you know, your transportation is on a whole nother level. You know, so if you tell people, oh, this is going to go to this, it's going to help you, it's going to be a hard sell, especially when people are still in, you know, tough predicament financially. A lot of folks, you know, we've done better than a lot of the country, but, you know, people aren't still, you know, tossing, you know, hundreds up in the air, at least not most of us. But yeah, I feel like these issues can definitely drive people to the polls. And it hasn't come down as a Republican-Democrat thing, I think, with the gas tax, maybe that more than some of the others, but not across the board, and casinos especially. People are campaigning on these issues, saying, here's where I stand, and this might not be the popular stance, but it's my conviction, and it's strong, and I think that's resonating with people. So yeah, and those are on the local races. So you get people going out for their local race, you get people going out for these ballot questions, you know, that could go right up the ticket.
I think everybody in Western Mass who drives up and down 91, particularly through Springfield, has to have an opinion on the gas tax.
Yeah, exactly.
And again, I think that's another one that has really spread through the social media world. There's no advertising for it. It's all done through word of mouth and social media. And you're right, and there is a cross-section, which actually leads me to what's going to be our final discussion point, is the casino question. Because you actually have groups that are on the opposite side of the spectrum, actually, and I don't think the casino question favors a Democrat or a Republican. I think it's going to favor maybe an individual candidate, depending on what your stance is. But you have such divergent groups working it together to defeat the casino casinos being able to go through and be built. That it's kind of weird to see these groups come together. You almost think of cats and dogs, Bill Murray and Ghostbusters, cats and dogs living together.
Mass hysteria. Yes.
I mean, but you actually have these groups that you would never see on the same side of the street together.
To me, I mean, that's made this whole election year, which has been lacking in fireworks, really exciting to report on. I've seen the way this casino issue has driven up through people. You watched it with the Democrats in the primary, and now let's just look at the governor's race. And it varies across the state. I mean, you had Charlie Baker in our editorial board meeting. Yeah. He says, you know what, if I'm elected, he took his whole support of one casino to the next level. And he said, if I'm elected and casino law is struck down, I am going to find a legislative way to save MGM Springfield, because Springfield deserves to have the casino they approved. He won this block of voters in Springfield that wasn't looking at Republican, Democrat. They're looking at, I voted for this casino, and I don't want Boston telling me what's right for my city. And Martha Coakley said that, she may or may not do something similar. She didn't really take a strong position on it. So I think Baker transcended party politics there. It made that race super interesting because of it. Am I right? Or?
Absolutely. And we saw something else in polls. Whether folks agreed with Baker or not on giving one to Springfield, no matter what it is, they liked the fact that he took a stand. And they didn't like the fact that, yeah, you know what, she's going to get there, she's going to do the exact same thing, was what the electorate then began to think. But why be wishy-washy now? He scored just by taking a stand. It's intriguing, too, because take a look at the commercials right now for the pro-casino side. They're predicated on Springfield. It's Jeff Safrida, the head of the Greater Springfield Chamber of Commerce's, who's out there talking about what this means. And if you read between the lines, it's not just a pro-Springfield thing. There's one thing that helps the pro-casino side against a question that's very difficult at the outside, because yes means no, and no means yes. First score to the antis, that they were able to get that through the Supreme Judicial Court, get it on the ballot, and have it worded that way. So they've got the first score. But now you've got this aspect of the pro-casino team, statewide, saying, let's look at MGM. When they went for this in the city of Springfield, whether you like it or you don't like it, just on the politics of it itself, they didn't just say, here's what's in it for the South End or downtown Springfield. They showed up in Pine Point. They were out in 16 acres and said, here's what's in it for you. Now, what could help them in this race to pull this off? They've got to get out to Pittsfield. They've got to go to North Adams. They've got to go to Lowell and Lawrence and say, here's what's in it for you. If there's one in Springfield, if Wynn gets it, is all set, and he's got his now, it's his site in Everett, and what happens with Plain Ridge, it's the cherry sheets. Everybody gets something. It's like the lottery. So that's their argument. On the other side of this, too, very quickly, there's the money. It comes back to what we talked about. It's always the money. Who is that? Joe Pesci, the money. It always comes back to the money, right? And it's the same thing here. Everyone thought this would be a $10 million race. I don't think the pro side has got to spend $10 million to get the no vote that they want. I think that it's going to be a lot less, because what have we learned in the last few days? And again, thanks to a benevolent or watchful media, I should say. The anti-side is $500,000 in the hole already. And the organizational aspect of the antis is stunning to me. If you're an anti, aren't you banging on Mayor Narkowitz's door in Northampton saying, rally the troops, you're against it? Aren't you over here in Long Meadow, where when we look at polling, it's predominantly against, because, hey, we're looking at this and it's right in Springfield, None of that's going on. None of that's happening. Yeah. So organizationally, the pro side has got it, and monetarily, the pro side. But what a great bang, what a great fight. We thought this one would have more of an impact on governor than the rest. Well, I think it's going to be the gas tax. I think it's going to come back to that one that most of us can really understand. Is it this or is it that? And it's how many cents at the pump.
So do the questions drive the race, or does the race drive the questions?
It depends. A good candidate for governor, he's driving it. She's driving it. Right now, that's the thing. I love what Rob said. Whether you're a Democrat or Republican, or you like Baker or you like Coakley, he grabbed this issue and said, definitively, here's where I am. Because as Governor Patrick said, this one issue takes all the air out of the room. I'm not going to let that happen. I'm not going to be defined by this issue. Here's where I stand. That's that. Let's go. And by the way, now that I've made that decision, let me tell you the other things I'm going to do about economic development, because this can't be it. It's not enough anymore. In a shrinking gaming market, that $63 or $68 million that's in our budget for this next quarter, that's not enough. So, touche.
Yeah. And I think you both hit it. He took a stand.
Yeah.
And that's very, for a politician, to take a stand, whether you're 100% with them or 50% with them, you saw someone to put it all on the table, whether you agree with them or not. Now, and that's why I think it's interesting, because some of the groups that are really behind Charlie, are anti-casino. And I don't think you forsake the governor's race for your single issue. On the other side of it, I don't know if that's the case. If you're so anti-casino, do you vote for the person that says, even if it's a Democrat or anything, do I really want them? And but I thought that by him taking a stand, whether you agree with him or not, at least you said, wait a minute, it's not this wishy-washy. I didn't get the political answer like you tried to give earlier. You got someone who said, here's what I think, like it or not, because he could have just he could have torqued off as many people as he got there. And I think for the people in the city of Springfield, that could be a clinching vote, whether you're a Democrat unenrolled or Republican. That here's a guy that said, the city did pass it, they want it. And you have a casino that wants the city, and I don't support it just because it is so close to Long Meadow, and there's reasons for that. But if you're in the city of Springfield, I can get it. They say, hey, I'm a Democrat or on a roll, but I'm going to support Charlie Baker because this guy's going to make sure it gets here. And I think that could be a telling difference. But you're right. I think the gas tax is stick it to Beacon Hill. Yeah. And anybody who's married to that, I think, will do very well.
Yeah.
Any parting thoughts on this before we have to wrap it up on this election cycle?
Well, I think that. I think it's going to be interesting to watch it all kind of wash out on November 4th. I don't know which way a lot of this is going to go, and that makes it all the much more exciting for me. Yeah. There's a lot at stake. There's a lot of good candidates. I really just hope that people pay attention. There are differences between the candidates, and you can't emphasize enough that, I know there's a lot of politics. People are turned off by a lot of it, but, get out there, take the time, and, if you're not reading my stuff or watching the different stations, do whatever it takes. Get your information from a number of places, but take the time and seek it out. It's just so important.
Yep. Tony?
It sounds simplistic, but every vote really does matter. We just saw it in the Democratic race for the Senate here, where it was a very, very, very tight victory for Eric Lesser. No, if you're Kim Allen, you're saying to yourself, gosh, golly gee whiz, if Springfield had just come out as it normally does by about 14%, and what a shame it is to be saying 14% would have been the vote, but it came in at 11, that could have been a difference. Every vote makes a difference. There's no question about it. And I love what you just said, too. We just said this to folks at the Chamber of Commerce yesterday. Get involved. There's still time to do it. Weigh in with these candidates and whatnot. Make sure they know what your issues are and whatnot, and what you're expecting from them after they get there. These are our lobbyists. These legislators that we send to Beacon Hill, they're our lobbyists against the flotilla of other lobbyists that show up for all the other special interests and whatnot. So this is it. I love the line that was in the Point of View newspaper by Frederick Hearst. If you don't show up, you got no right to complain at all. Just quiet yourself down, go away, don't bother us anymore. Yep. But the bottom line is you can have an impact. And this is it. It's our government.
That's right. And folks, you have about 5 weeks to learn the differences between these candidates. And if not, just close your eyes and pull something. That's better than doing nothing. But the reality is I want to thank Tony and Rob because basically you heard a lot of good information about the different issues that are before us in November. You have a bunch of candidates out there. It's probably the first time in a long time you can actually, if you're a political junkie, get excited about a lot of this stuff because there are some really good races. And like you said, I think there's going to be some bloodletting before November 4th is over. So, and again, as a political junkie, I think that's fantastic. But get out there and vote. I want to say thank you to you guys. It was a great opportunity to pick your brains on this. And for this, it's been an hour. And it's already gone, it's already gone. We could do about another 4, but these guys probably want to go home. So thank you again for watching The Upside. We'll see you on the next show. Have a great day. Thank you.